The city of Lagos is a place of noise, of shimmering glass skyscrapers that touch the clouds, and sprawling slums that hug the blackish waters of the lagoon. In this city of extremes lived a man whose name was whispered in both the corridors of power and the stores of the marketplace. Adebayo Falade. Adebayo was a billionaire whose wealth was as vast as the Atlantic Ocean. He owned shipping lines, oil blocks, and telecommunication giants. He was young, handsome, and carried himself with the cold, detached elegance of a man who had seen everything and felt nothing. But for all his riches, Adebayo had a peculiar habit that kept the city's gossip mills spinning. Adebayo Falade would only eat food cooked by a blind woman. It did not matter if the chef was trained in the finest culinary schools in Paris or had a Michelin star to their name. If they had their sight, Adebayo would not touch their food. He claimed that sighted people cook with their eyes, worrying about colors, plating, and the superficial beauty of a dish, while their hearts were full of greed, envy, and distractions. The eyes are the windows to the soul, Adebayo would say during his rare interviews, but they are also the doors through which deceit enters the kitchen. For 3 years, Yetunde had been his cook. She was elderly and had lost her sight to glaucoma decades ago. Her food was legendary. When she pounded yam, the rhythm was like a heartbeat. When she stirred her efforiro, the aroma could wake the ancestors. But Yetunde had passed away in her sleep, leaving the billionaire's kitchen cold and his heart even colder. The news of Yetunde's death sent Adebayo into a dark spiral. He grew thin. He became irritable, firing 3 secretaries in a single week. His fiancée, Teniola, a high society interior designer whose skin was the color of expensive caramel and whose heart was as hard as a diamond, was losing her patience. Adebayo, this is ridiculous, Teniola shouted, her gold bangles clinking as she paced the marble floor of his Banana Island mansion. I have brought you the head chef from the Oriental Hotel. He has prepared a feast fit for a king. Eat! Adebayo looked at the beautifully plated lobster and jollof rice. He leaned in, inhaled, and then pushed the plate away with a look of disgust. It smells of ambition, Adebayo said quietly. He didn't cook this because he loves the ingredients. He cooked it because he wants me to invest in his restaurant. I can taste the desperation in the steam. You are insane, Teniola screamed. If you don't find someone soon, you will starve to death in the middle of your billions. Adebayo ignored her and called for his most trusted driver and confidant, Babatunde. Babatunde, Adebayo said, raspy, drive. Get out of Lagos. Go towards the interior. Go towards the hills of Ekiti or the plains of Oyo. Find me a woman who cooks in the dark. A woman who knows the salt, not by its color, but by its weight. Go. Babatunde traveled for 3 days. He visited villages where the dust was red and the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke. Finally, in a small tucked-away hamlet on the outskirts of Akure, he heard of a woman named Moremi. Moremi was young, perhaps in her late 20s, which was unusual. Most blind cooks were elderly. The villagers spoke of her with a mix of pity and reverence. She had lost her sight in a tragic fire when she was a child, a fire that had claimed her parents. She lived alone in a small hut, but the scent that drifted from her kitchen was said to be so divine that even the birds would stop singing to linger in the air. Babatunde watched her from a distance. Moremi moved through her small kitchen with the grace of a dancer. She didn't stumble, she didn't hesitate. She felt the ripeness of a tomato with a gentle squeeze. She heard the exact moment the oil in the pan reached the perfect temperature. When Babatunde approached her and told her of the billionaire in Lagos who needed a cook, Moremi laughed. It was a sound like silver bells. Why would a man with the world at his feet want a girl with nothing in her eyes, she asked. Because he's starving, Babatunde replied truthfully. Not for food, but for something real. Moremi agreed to go, not for the money, though the amount Babatunde offered could buy her entire village, but because she felt a strange pulling sensation in her chest, a tug of destiny she couldn't explain. When Moremi arrived at the Falade mansion, the servant stared. She wore a simple buba and iro. Her eyes were milky and unmoving, but her head was held high. Teniola was there, sipping champagne. She looked at Moremi and sneered. So, this is the new savior. She looks like she belongs in a charity ward, not a billionaire's kitchen. Moremi did not flinch. She turned her head toward Teniola and said, "The tongue that speaks bitterness can never truly appreciate sweetness," she said softly. Teniola gasped, insulted, but Adebayo stepped out of the shadows. He looked at Moremi. For the first time in months, his eyes showed a spark of interest. "Cook," he commanded. Moremi was led to the kitchen. It was a state-of-the-art facility with induction hobs and sub-zero refrigerators, but she asked for a simple stone hearth or a gas stove. She spent hours feeling the spices, smelling the meats, and humming an old Yoruba lullaby. She prepared a simple dish, beberi and ewedu, with soft amala. When the bowl was placed before Adebayo, the room went silent. The steam rose in elegant swirls. Adebayo took a spoon, dipped it into the soup, and took a bite. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, he wasn't in a mansion in Lagos. He was a boy again, sitting on a wooden stool in his mother's kitchen before the great fire. He felt the warmth of a sun that had long since set. He felt safe. Adebayo ate the entire bowl. He didn't speak. When he finished, he looked at Moremi, who was standing at the door. "What did you put in this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Honesty," Moremi replied, "and a little bit of memory." As the weeks passed, Moremi became the center of the household. Adebayo's health returned, and with it a newfound softness. He began to spend hours in the kitchen, not eating, but just watching Moremi work. He found her silence more comforting than the loudest parties in Victoria Island. Teniola was livid. She saw her grip on Adebayo and his fortune slipping away. She was supposed to be the Mrs. Falade. She was the one who belonged on the covers of Genevieve magazine. She would not be displaced by a blind village girl. She began her campaign of sabotage. First, she tried to bribe Moremi to leave. "Take 5 million naira and vanish," she hissed in the hallway one afternoon. "A man like Adebayo is just playing with you. You're a novelty, a toy. Once he's bored of the blind girl act, he will throw you back into the gutter." I have been in the gutter, and I have been in the palace. The darkness is the same in both places. I am not here for his money. Failing at bribery, Teniola turned to cruelty. One evening, before a high-profile dinner where Adebayo was hosting the governor, Teniola snuck into the kitchen when Moremi was preparing the main course, a delicate seafood okra. Teniola pulled a small vial of highly concentrated industrial salt and a dash of bitter kola extract from her purse. She poured it into the pot, grinning wickedly. "Let's see him swallow this honesty," she whispered. At the dinner table, the governor and his wife were full of praise for Adebayo's success. "I hear your new cook is a marvel, Adebayo. A blind woman? How poetic." Adebayo smiled. "She is more than a cook. She sees things we cannot." The food was served. Adebayo took the first bite, eager to show off Moremi's talent. But as soon as the soup touched his tongue, his face contorted. It was foul, unnaturally salty and bitter enough to make his throat constrict. He looked at Moremi, who was standing at the back of the room. For a moment, doubt clouded his eyes. Had she finally failed? Teniola leaned in, her voice full of mock concern. "Oh dear, Adebayo, is something wrong? Perhaps the blind genius finally lost her touch. This is embarrassing. Governor, please don't eat that. It might be poisonous." The governor hesitated, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Moremi stepped forward. She didn't need eyes to feel the tension. "Master," she said, her voice steady, "I be not season that pot with bitterness, but the pot knows who touched it last." "What does that mean?" Teniola snapped. "Adebayo, fire her immediately." Adebayo looked from Teniola to the soup. He noticed a small glistening droplet on the rim of the pot, a drop of Teniola's expensive signature perfume. He knew that scent anywhere. It was oud rose, a custom blend he had bought for her. Adebayo's face went cold. "Teniola," he said quietly, "taste the soup. What? No, why would I? Taste it, he barked, his voice echoing like thunder. Teniola trembled. She took a tiny sip and immediately spat it out, coughing. It's just a mistake. She's blind. She probably grabbed the wrong jar, Teniola cried. Moremi does not have industrial salt in her kitchen, and she certainly doesn't wear your perfume, Adebayo said, and standing up. Get out, Teniola. Our engagement is over, and if I ever see you near my gates again, I will ensure your father's business is erased by morning. Teniola fled the room in tears, the governor and his wife watching in stunned silence. After the guest had left, the house was quiet. Adebayo sat in the kitchen with Moremi. He felt a deep sense of shame. I almost doubted you, he said. Moremi was cleaning a countertop. Doubt is the sight man's shadow. It follows you everywhere. Adebayo looked at her, really looked at her. He noticed for the first time a small jagged scar on her shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. His heart skipped a beat. Moremi, he said, his voice a whisper, where did you get that scar? Moremi paused. Her hand went to her shoulder. The fire that took my eyes, she said. I was 6 years old. There was another boy in the house, a neighbor's son. I tried to pull him out before the roof collapsed. I saved him, but a burning beam fell on me. I never saw his face again. I only remember his name. It was Bayo. Adebayo stood up so quickly his chair fell over. He grabbed his own shirt and pulled the collar down, revealing a matching crescent moon scar on his chest. The boy's name wasn't just Bayo. It was Adebayo. My parents were the neighbors. They thought you had died in the hospital. I have spent my whole life looking for a woman who could cook like my mother. But I wasn't looking for a cook. I was looking for the girl who gave her sight to save my life. Moremi stood still. She couldn't see the scar, but she reached out her hand. Adebayo took it and placed it against the jagged skin on his chest. She felt the mark. Her fingers trembled. You grew up, she whispered. I can feel the heartbeat of the boy I saved. The revelation changed everything. Adebayo didn't just keep Moremi as his cook. He began to treat her as his equal. He hired the best surgeons from London and Germany to fly into Lagos. He was determined to give her back the gift she had lost for him. After a complex series of surgeries, the day finally came for the bandages to be removed. Adebayo stood in the hospital room, his hands shaking. He was terrified. What if she saw him and didn't like the man he had become? What if the world was too loud and bright for her? As the doctor unraveled the last layer of gauze, Moremi blinked. She winced at the light. Slowly, the world came into focus. She saw the white walls, the flowers, and then she saw the man standing at the foot of the bed. Adebayo held his breath. Moremi looked at him for a long time. Then she shook her head and closed her eyes. Moremi, Adebayo asked, panicked. Can you not see? I can see, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But the world is so busy, Adebayo. There is so much noise in the light. She opened her eyes again and looked at him. You are more handsome than my heart imagined. But tell me, Adebayo, now that I can see, will you still let me cook for you? Adebayo laughed, a genuine, joyous sound. Moremi, you can do whatever you want. You are the mistress of this house. But as the months went by, a new problem arose. Moremi's cooking changed. Now that she could see the colors of the peppers and the arrangement of the meat, she began to plate the food like a professional. She spent time worrying about the garnishes, and to Adebayo's horror, the food began to taste ordinary. It tasted like the food of the chefs he had fired. It tasted like ambition. It tasted like sight. One evening, Adebayo sat before a plate of perfectly presented jollof rice. It looked beautiful, but the honesty was gone. He looked at Moremi, who was watching him expectantly. Her new eyes bright and clear. Is it not good? She asked, worried. Adebayo looked at the woman he loved. He realized that the very thing he had given her, her sight, had taken away the unique soul of her gift. He had a choice, to tell her the truth and break her heart, or to eat mediocre food for the rest of his life. But Moremi was ahead of him. She saw the slight hesitation in his chew. She saw the way his eyes didn't light up. She walked over, took the plate from him, and dumped it in the bin. Moremi, what are you doing? She went to the drawer and pulled out a clean silk scarf. She handed it to him. Blindfold me, she commanded. What? No, I can't. Moremi, she said, her voice firm. I spent 20 years in the dark, and in that dark, I found a language. I am trying to speak a new language now, the language of the eyes, but it is not my mother tongue. If you want to eat the soul of the woman who saved you, you must let me go back to the place where I see with my heart. With trembling hands, Adebayo tied the silk scarf over her beautiful eyes. Moremi sighed, a look of peace washing over her face. She turned back to the stove. She didn't look at the spice jars. She felt them. She didn't check the timer. She listened to the sizzle. An hour later, she placed a bowl of simple yam porridge before him. Adebayo took a bite. The tears returned instantly. It was there, the warmth, the sun, the memory, the safety. He realized then the greatest twist of all. His wealth could buy her the best doctors in the world. It could buy her the finest clothes and the brightest lights. But the most precious thing they shared was a secret that lived only in the dark. From that day on, Moremi Falade lived as a woman of two worlds. In the day, she ran a foundation that helped blind children across West Africa, using her eyes to navigate the world of business. But every evening, when it was time to cook for the man whose life was bound to hers, she would tie a silk scarf over her beautiful eyes. And the billionaire who only ate food cooked by a blind woman finally understood that the most beautiful things in life, love, sacrifice, and the perfect meal, are not seen at all. They are felt. The village girl and the billionaire lived a life that was the envy of all Lagos, not because of the cars or the mansion, but because they were the only two people in a city of millions who truly knew how to see in the dark.